Tensions between the United States and Venezuela are at breaking point.
It's a move from rhetoric into kinetic military attacks.
Videos released by the Trump administration have shown the U.S. Navy using lethal force against boats suspected of drug trafficking. The U.S. has accused Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro of organizing the flow of narcotics into America through the Caribbean.
We view the Maduro regime as illegitimate.
Listos y preparados en las 260,000 calles para pasar a la lucha armada cuando haga falta.
With the temperature rising between the two nations, could we be on the cusp of a deadly war in the Americas? On Inauguration Day this year, Trump signed an executive order that labeled drug cartels as terrorist organizations. It gives Trump the power to retaliate against the cartels as imminent threats to the United States.
The White House is basically authorizing military engagement with those that fall under this new designation. So basically, this gives a cover to the Washington administration in order on how to use lethal force in the Caribbean Sea.
However, the strikes were carried out in international waters, drawing criticism about the legality of military action.
So obviously there is a discussion by those that defend that these type of attacks might incur in some violation of international law, but the White House clearly signed this executive order in which they allow their forces by their domestic law to engage militarily with what they call their adversaries.
639 tons of cocaine circulated through Venezuela in 2023, representing nearly 24% of the world's cocaine production. However, in 2024, the DEA estimated that 90% of cocaine that reached the US was trafficked from Colombia through Central America. So why is the US so focused on Venezuela? Well, it's all about this guy, Nicolas Maduro.
Well, in order to understand President Nicolas Maduro, we need to go back to the late 90s when former president and the late president Hugo Chavez came into power with a very anti-Western rhetoric. Current President Maduro was his number two. He became his Minister of Foreign Affairs. So he was quite embedded in what the Chavismo revolution meant for Venezuela. He continues a larger movement towards the Russia, China, and Iran axis. Conditions in which Nicolas Maduro runs the country are quite pathetic and awful.
In 2025, the U.S. Justice Department increased the reward or information leading to Maduro's arrest up to an eye-watering $50 million.
Maduro uses foreign terrorist organizations like TDA, Sinaloa, and Cartel of the Suns to bring deadly drugs and violence into our country.
You need to understand the context on how Venezuela has been governed and run every day. So there's nothing that Nicolas Maduro doesn't know, and he relies quite heavily on the armed forces. Criminal governance that happens in Venezuela, it needs to be in connection with the government. The U.S. has attributed that the leader of all of this is Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela.
The U.S. has now moved several Navy ships into the Caribbean, as well as spy plane and an amphibious assault team.
It's quite unprecedented in the region. The military buildup by the U.S. is not new. They've always been patrolling the sea, especially everything that's south the coast of the state of Florida in the U.S. But these attacks on these boats, they weren't the normal. So everyone is quite worried about how this might escalate.
No es una tensión, es una agresión en toda la línea. Es una agresión judicial cuando nos criminalizan. Es una agresión política con sus declaraciones amenazantes diarias. Es una agresión diplomática y es una agresión en camino de carácter militar.
In response, Maduro orchestrated a huge multi-platform exercise in the Caribbean.
The military exercises as a counteraction by the Venezuelans, it's clearly one of the few alternatives that Nicolas Maduro has. As I've mentioned, he relies quite heavily on the armed forces. His rhetoric as an anti-Western government can be strengthened by sending the military to conduct these operations in their economic exclusive zone.
So are the two nations heading for open warfare in the Caribbean?
The US is clearly going somewhere. You don't build that much power in the sea if you're not going to use it. The kinetic attacks to the 3 boats that we at least know publicly have been of high tech, supposedly drones and other sort of military air power has been used in order to missile down these boats. A warlike type of move is never seen just through the military lens. You need to calculate the political factors, diplomatic factors, ways of communication between both countries, whether there are or there aren't any back channels of diplomacy between the United States and Maduro. It's very hard, even for military analysts, to just say that because we have a build-up, there will be some sort of military engagement. Clearly, the US is not making our job any easier because we don't know what the ultimate goal of all this movement is.
Venezuela boasts a military force of 137,000 active servicemen in their army, 34 Navy vessels, and 40 aircraft.
The reported data that we have on the state of the Venezuelan armed forces is that because Chavez and Maduro always cared a lot about their connection with the armed forces, they've always funneled money, state money, into buying new technologies. The thing is that they don't have too many suppliers, mostly because they're seen as a pariah state to the international defense companies. So whatever they can access is usually old Russian or new cyber or other type of drone technologies, either from China or from Iran. So fighting a war that will demand frigates, submarines, air power, radars, and other sort of hard military power type of technologies, I don't think Venezuela is prepared due to the old aging arsenal that they have.